Hi, everyone. We will give it just a few more minutes to let more attendees join. For those of you just joining, we're giving it just a few more minutes to allow attendees to join. All right, we're at 5 minutes after. I think we have a good number of attendees now. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you all to Webinar Wednesday, Here at the Cybersecurity Nonprofit, we do a webinar every Wednesday. Starting next week, we will be doing it at 7 p.m. Central Time. Today, we're starting a little bit earlier. I am Eric Evans, the Director of Research and Development and Atlanta Chapter President for the Cybersecurity Nonprofit. I am joined today by David Klein, Senior Director of Engineering and Architecture at Guardicore, and Robert McCurdy will be joining us. He is a cybersecurity specialist for network and ETD at Newell Brands. We have a pretty good webinar scheduled for today. David will be talking about software-defined segmentation, which is always an interesting topic for those of us who are interested in segmenting our networks. And then Robert McCurdy will be talking about Android application security and have some interesting demos to show as well. We would like to give a special shout out to our sponsor today, Guardicore. They are really good. Great. With that said, Dave, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Eric, I would love to.
Great.
Excellent. Share my screen. It says host disabled attendee screen sharing. I think you have to give me rights to share screen. Great, continue. Perfect, and hit share. Excellent, you guys see the screen okay?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect, let me go ahead and put it in slideshow, presentation mode. Excellent, thank you everyone for attending today. It's good to see all of you, even if it's just virtual. Next time, hopefully we'll be together in person. So yes, we're talking about software-defined segmentation today. A little bit about myself, I'm a 21-year veteran in cybersecurity. I did a lot of things in my career, including 4 years post 9/11 in New York City, helping shore up security there, 10 years of doing US federal work, as well as a lot of incident response work throughout my career. You can follow me on Twitter, on CyberCaffeinate. I tend to not just retransmit things, but really try to get some thought and commentary on things that I write about. So I come from a company called Guardicore, and we, of course, specialize in software-defined segmentation. So our specialty is really providing visibility and software-defined segmentation across all platforms seamlessly to reduce risk, to ensure compliance, to reduce costs. We also include breach detection and incident response capabilities in that solution as well. Everything from reputation to dynamic deception honeypots and other things to help you secure and shore up your networks. We're also known for our Guardicore Labs researchers. These are a bunch of men and women who are phenomenal at cybersecurity research, and have helped find everything from like vulnerability findings. We were able to uncover a problem with VMware's API to allow people to get access to the guest images easily without any passwords. We also have found vulnerabilities in Azure, and we find attackers all the time. The most recent one is called Vulgar, and we found other ones in the past as well. So we always are coming out with a new release of, hey, check this out. We found a new attacker. Let me tell you all about them, give you all the indicators of compromise, as well as other things. And also, we have an open source free project called Guardicore Infection Monkey. I encourage everyone to try this. It's free, it's easy, it's open source. It's an automatic attack simulation tool. It's safe for continuous evaluation of your environments, everything from vSphere, AWS, Azure, GCP, you name it, OpenStack, OpenShift. Gives you actionable prescriptive results of what it finds and recommendations. So this is, again, it's an open source free project. Go check that out. So let's talk about software-defined segmentation. I always like to start talking about how the world has kind of changed when it comes to information technology, and that really how much DevOps plays a role in the modern enterprise. I was talking to a fellow cybersecurity expert named Tricia Howard, and I was trying to explain what I felt was the kind of the landscape today. And she said, well, it's really an impossible triangle. I go, what do you mean? So, well, there's this triangle. It's an optical illusion. If you look at it, the top point seems farther away from the two bottom points, and it's called the Penrose triangle. But it really describes what you're talking about. And what I was talking about was business has come a long way in 10 years. It used to be that IT was viewed as an expense, a problem. Today, in the full midday sun of the information age, business demands that IT as a valuable resource to accelerate delivery, essential competitive differentiation, to have IT provide efficiencies and savings and integration into all the things that make the business work and access. And IT has responded through this kind of DevOps cloud model. And what's important to say about this is that DevOps cloud model exists even if someone's not in technically the cloud. It's a way of handling things in their environment that you even see people who have just premises utilize. So one is simplification via solutions that are platform and operating system agnostic. The idea is we have so many different platforms and operating systems, and no one's really bothered about them anymore. They want to go ahead and say, I'm going to provide a solution that works across all the platforms and operating systems in an agnostic, seamless fashion. So the idea is instead of getting point solutions, people are saying, I need to stop that and consolidate and find things that work across the board. They're using playbooks and scripting, the idea of automating the ability to go out there and make their world easier. No manual moves, adds, changes, deletes. Provisioning, the idea of being able to use these playbooks to provision things out, and not just images, but whole environments with just a few keystrokes. So the idea of automation, auto-scaling is there. So what about security? So we talked about that Penrose triangle, that the optical illusion is the top point of that triangle looks like it's farther away. And that's where security resides, right? So the idea is you're trying to figure out how you're going to make security fit in this model that's accelerated, automated. And the answer is for all security solutions you're looking at, not just software-defined segmentation, you should have these tenets. It should be, something that simplifies the environment, right? And works seamlessly across all the platforms in an agnostic fashion. It should be something that can work at high speed. The idea is not replacing a manual process. You're doing something with an automated, faster process. It has to be DevOps friendly, playbook capable, automatable. It provides great visibility and granular enforcement. And the idea of doing something once and doing it right. So the idea is something you don't have to come back to over and over again. And those kind of tenets, those 6 tenets, is something that I look at not only just for software-defined segmentation, but any kind of implementation I want to do across my environment. If I'm looking to do dual-factor authentication, if I'm looking to do identity management, these are the kind of important goals that you should have in advance to say, does this solution fit this model? Because it's what you need to have security be part of that speed and innovation that you see today. So software-defined segmentation was not done in a vacuum. It learned from the past segmentation failures. And we look at traditional ways to segment. You had premises, you had clouds, and you had firewalls at the perimeter. And the problem with all 3 of these methodologies was you didn't have what was necessary to be part of that new DevOps model, right? It wasn't fast, it wasn't DevOps friendly, it wasn't automatable, didn't work, it wasn't one solution across the entire enterprise. There's a bunch of point solutions. You didn't have visibility, you didn't have really good granularity of enforcement, and it wasn't done once, done right. And we look a little deeper in this, a little bit more. You look at the different ways that people had done this in the past. You had VLANs and ACLs, and you had security groups and clouds. And the challenges here was these were multiple segmentation techniques that had to be combined to work across all the environment. You had to have, they were very management resource intensive. There were manual things, manual moves, adds, changes, deletes. They provided zero visibility, so it's difficult to create policies in the first place, and a lack of granularity. What do I mean by lack of granularity? Well, in both VLANs, ACLs, and security groups, you're really dealing with IP address and port level enforcement, so layer 4 enforcement. So you have no ability to do things like, hey, I have a proxy server, and I have this Nginx proxy, and I also have this evil process that I don't want to access anything, it's malicious. And I want the Nginx process to talk to a web proxy, a Tomcat server, let's say, and only that works. Well, unfortunately, in the traditional methodology, you can't do it by process. You're stuck up at a port and IP address. Also, there's no policy by identity. There's no ability to say, hey, I have a single jump box. There's a user Allison and a user Diane. Allison works with accounting. Diane works with the diagnostic software we have. I want them to be able to use PuTTY to use SSHD on each of these machines. And the challenge was, again, you couldn't do identity in the traditional methodology. And finally, as things auto-scale, whether talk about antivirus updates, software updates like GitHub, operating system kernel updates, all these things auto-scale just like we do. So it's difficult to sit there and put in a string of IP addresses and say, go get updates. So you have to be able to do it by fully qualified domain name. So all 3 of these policy types of things that you want to do, you couldn't do in the traditional sense. Also, in the traditional VLANs, ACLs, and security groups, you really couldn't do what we call blacklisting. The idea is the ability to go in there and say, you know what, I want to say, FTP works across multiple ports, but I don't care about the ports. I want to say if this FTP process occurs anywhere in production, don't allow it. Same for Telnet or TFTP. Or, hey, I have a proxy server, so if anything tries to go to the internet, don't allow it. And root users shouldn't be able to get to the outside world because we don't want to use root users because they have escalated privileges. These things were not possible in traditional methods of segmentation. On top of that, you had firewalls. And when I started in this business about 4 years ago, what I found was people kind of really already understood that VLANs, security groups, and ACLs were not the way to go, but some thought that firewalls could. And the challenge with firewalls are they're still a perimeter device. The idea is they're not omnipresent. And the point is today, the workflows go throughout the environment in east-west traffic fashion, so a lateral movement fashion, and the firewalls aren't where they need to be. They become bottlenecks, they become choke points, even if you spend tons of money on them. And I'm happy to say most people realize now that the firewalls aren't the right answer for this lateral movement and protection and segmentation, just like ACLs, VLANs, and security groups are as well. So let's talk about software-defined segmentation. I want to start with the name. When we started in this field, they called it microsegmentation. However, a lot of people misconstrued that name. People thought that was very much a single use case dealing with the interdependencies between an application, like the layers of an application. And that's not really what software-defined segmentation is. Microsegmentation is just one use case among many that people do. So software-defined segmentation has become a better term for the solution as what's been kind of adopted by everyone. Some sample software-defined segmentation use cases. As we talk about these, also what we need to understand is there's a strategy in place here. You want to start with low-hanging fruit. What matters most? What will make the biggest difference? And from there, we look at the different use cases. So you have digital crown jewels protection. So we're talking about things like point-of-sale systems, medical devices that can't be patched, but you want to be able to have them in the environment but still protected. Separating your development, your UAT environment, your production environment from each other. Separation of Internet of Things objects, building controls, OT devices, users, data centers, legacy apps and operating systems. And then finally, the microsegmentation, which we said was a subset of various things between the tiers of an application. Number two on use cases is compliance. What I find is compliance really drives software-defined segmentation. And in fact, if you look at each one of the standards you see on the screen here, they all talk about software-defined segmentation. They use different terminologies. They use things like network segmentation. They use things like isolation, segregation. They use different words, but they all are talking about software-defined segmentation to be able to isolate various environments from others. And there's data center transformation. The idea of through merger acquisitions, cloud migration, and hybrid cloud integration, this also becomes very important for software-defined segmentation. And finally, zero trust. Zero trust is a streamlined process to basically go through, and it's a framework to be able to go after your environment, after that low-hanging fruit to find out what's most important to fix. And we have a lot of resources on this. You can go to our site and see this. We have a video that I do. You can see here a little thing in the corner here where I talk about software-defined segmentation. And in fact, the Infection Monkey tool that we have, which is a free tool, allows you to look at the zero trust mandala and relate its findings to things based on zero trust. So we've taken the time to really operationalize how to do zero trust in data centers and clouds and hybrid cloud environments. So who's involved in software-defined segmentation projects? So in the past, coming from a security background, I always thought it was a CISO or security executive, but there's also the infrastructure person and the DevOps person as well. And what we find is 70% of the time, it does start in security, but you need to also see the infrastructure person. Sometimes they start the project too, about 30% of the time. But when all is said and done, you need to involve the security people, the infrastructure people, and the DevOps people. The idea when you have all three of these different players in play, it's very successful. The security person understands what's required, the infrastructure person knows how it's implemented, and the DevOps person helps as well in getting it rolled out through playbooks and automation. So what are the steps? There are really 5 steps in looking at software-defined segmentation and rolling out. And again, you do this in a low-hanging fruit fashion. You say, I'm going to start with this one critical application or this specific environment that I want to do first. And you start at 12 o'clock, you discover and visualize and map out the environment to understand how it looks. You create labels and groups. You create the policies, you monitor and refine, and then you push it into enforce mode. And it's a cyclical, fashionable thing that you go in circles around. So what should a solution have? So what we found out to be successful, there's several things that you need to have a successful software-defined segmentation solution. One is you need the widest possible platform supported. The idea is that everyone today has bare metal, hypervisors, cloud, and containers, and even serverless. And so you have to be able to handle all these things in a unified fashion. And you need to also include metadata integration. So while you do this from covering all the environments in a single pane of glass, you also want to be able to go into each of these environments and pull out of it metadata. So for example, here you see VMware, and you see all the information about the VMware over here in the corner, what applications are running, what IP address is, what tenant, what host it's on, what its asset name is. If it was AWS, for example, you want to pull in things like what security group it is, what's its DNS name, what's its image name, what instance is it, what VPC. The idea is you're pulling in these rich contextual data to help you be able to create labels and understand what is there. Also, we have Red Hat OpenShift. You want to be able to go in there and look at your container environments and bring this stuff in. So the idea is you want to start with the widest possible platform support available, as well as a lot of metadata. And you also want to support the largest number of operating systems imaginable. What I find when I talk to my customers and prospects is a lot of them are dealing with legacy applications that are running in Windows 2008 or 2003. They're running HPUX, as well as the most modern operating systems imaginable. So in order to be able to support the solutions across all your customer base, you need to be able to cover the deep legacy all the way through the most modern. And often what I find is segmentation solutions and use cases often start with the legacy in trying to protect the legacy environments and visualize it and protect it before migrating off of it or even staying with it. So that the legacy is kind of really important. And then finally, one of the key elements in the beginning part of it is an agent with its own firewall. So what does this mean? The bottom line is that when you look at software-defined segmentation, to be able to do policy granularity by process, by fully qualified domain name, by user, you need to have your own agent. Why? If you don't, you're stuck with the firewall that's provided to you from basically Microsoft and or Linux. Well, in Linux, you're only IP address and port. So you're not able to get down into the processes, the users, and fully qualified domain names. And in Windows, you're stuck with only the supported operating systems that Windows supports. So by having this capability, you have uniform policy rollout across all your operating systems natively. And then number two is, we talked about blacklist earlier. You want to be able to do blacklist. Again, you need to have your own firewall to do that. And finally, by having your own firewall, you have no contention for control over the administrators or routes. The idea is you can make changes and not have an administrator make a change back on you by accident or on purpose. And you have consistent policies across all operating systems and platforms and less latency. So the big thing that we found that was kind of surprising is the native operating system IP tables and Linux and Windows operating system firewall have been around a long time, and they're kind of code fat. And so we found out that we actually have the capability of being able to provide less latency with our own firewall than if using a native firewall. And this is kind of interesting because people think it would be the opposite, that a native firewall would be better, but actually we are. So what are other things you need for software-defined segmentation to be successful? You need visibility. So the idea is if you're going to create labels and groups and policies, you need real-time and historical visibility. The idea of being able to say, hey, I want to be able to segment this one application. I want to know that I'm not missing any traffic. I need 90 days to do that. So you get the visibility of going back in time and seeing all the transactions. So it allows you to easily create and apply labels to understand application dependencies. It allows you to sort in a variety of ways that people wish to see their enterprises. And by different ways of sorting, the idea is by doing this, you might have some people who want to look at it one way, while other people another way. So for example, I may want to sort by platform. Here's my OpenShift versus VMware, AWS, or bare metal. Or I might say, hey, listen, I want to see by development versus production versus infrastructure. I want to be able to segment it that way. Or see it by compliance, right? So if I'm a compliance officer, I need to see what's, for example, PCI compliant when I need to isolate and control versus other things. And that's kind of critical to rolling out. Also, you need to have a flexible labeling schema. And the idea of being able to come up with application dependency mapping. What you're seeing over here on the right-hand side is a billing application and the tiers of the application, and be able to roll out and see how the dependency mapping works. Plus, you need to be able to have the ability to dynamically apply labels. The idea is that you don't want to sit there and say, well, I have an environment and I've labeled everything, because the point is you're going to auto scale things out. You might have provision additional workloads. So you want to be able to not have to add additional labels after you the first time. So you want to be able to go in there and allow the ability to add labels in a dynamic fashion as you spin out new workloads. So you don't have any manual moves, add changes, or deletes. And also allow you to script out labels as well as part of that DevOps process. Also, what we find is very helpful is not only creating these visualized maps of application dependencies, but also suggesting policies for you by being able to say, here's the application dependency mapping we see, here's the processes, the identities, and the fully qualified domain names that we see. Let's create a policy based on this. This helps you really accelerate software-defined segmentation solutions and rolling out projects in a fast fashion. Finally, you want to be able to also have a REST API set. So the idea is being able to tie in the software-defined segmentation solutions for things like your CMDB databases, being able to push and pull information into the solution and out again, into your SIMs and other things like that. So having a REST API set is also very important for software-defined segmentation. So I'm going to leave you with a use case. I'll give you an example of a top 5 global bank. We're very big across multiple verticals. Financial is probably the largest, and especially the top 5 global banks. We have 3 of the top 5 global banks. And this one in particular, we met with them and they said, we have 4 things that we're really consider critical for our success in the world today. And we think that you guys do software-defined segmentation. We think, if I look at this, that you do the bottom thing, application segmentation. But really, we have a number of other things we want to do first. And what we found was they thought we only get to application segmentation, but really all these were software-defined segmentation use cases, all these things here. So let's go through how we helped them. So the first thing that was really an issue for them is they had a massive environment with tons and tons of VLANs. And they mistakenly realized one day that someone from development was able to send a large sum of money to a production bank. And what they found out was their DevOps environment and production environment and UAT overlapped in VLANs. So there was an accidental transfer of money. And the auditor said, you have to change this right away. If they did it in the manual, traditional way, by changing VLANs and IP addresses, this would have taken years. What they did with us is without VLAN changes, use playbooks to push all the Guardicore agents out to the world, mapped out these 3 environments, and created a policy level, process level enforcement, and separated this environment. It took a few weeks instead of years. So the key is software-defined segmentation here accelerated the ability to secure these environments, and we were able to do that for them. The other thing they found out after they did the first use case that they wanted to use us for is they had spent all this money on security cameras, and they had pushed them out to thousands of banks, tens of thousands of bank locations, and they were on the data center VLANs. They had users who could reach a data center. They had building control systems, network devices, and they wanted to be able to segment these all off from each other. They were able to do it in a very quick time, and again, without VLAN or IP address changes, in an automated fashion where things were dynamically pushed out and provisioned, and we were able to get it done within the first year. And then the other things we had were similar to the first 2 use cases, where they wanted to go ahead and isolate things really easily. So we were able to go ahead and do all these things, including the final thing, the application segmentation, all relatively easy in a short period of time because of that. Also, what was interesting about them in particular, talking about the last thing we talked about, what you need for software-defined segmentation, was they had a lot of data stores that they wanted to integrate with the software-defined segmentation. They had a bunch of CMDB stores, which we pushed into the solution. They had firewall rule sets. They said, listen, firewalls aren't everywhere, but you know what? If something is protected by a firewall, it's less important than something that is not. So we were able to also create labels based on firewall policies to know what was covered and what was not covered by firewalls to say, what do we want to go after first, right? Things that were not protected by the firewall. We talked to their SIM system, their monitoring system, their Active Directory for identity. We talked to the PKI system for dual factor authentication and ticketing system as well. And that's pretty much my presentation. Eric, I'll turn it back to you. If there's any Q&A, any questions?
All right, Dave, thank you very much for that. Fantastic presentation. Very, very enlightening as far as all that goes. So we do have a Q&A section here on Zoom for anyone in the audience who would like to ask Dave a question on this presentation. Please just click on the Q&A Q&A button on the bottom. Type in your question, and we will be happy to send those over to Dave for as a question to get an answer to. It looks like we already have some Q&As lined up. So I'll go ahead and tee up the first one for you. So this one says, obviously there's a cost, but what would your opinion be of Fortinet's marketing their higher bandwidth appliances as ISFW, which is internally segmenting firewalls? The basic gist is utilizing the high throughput to provide segmentation at the network level, while also integrating the quote unquote security fabric automation they've built.
So I'll say it, as having been in the business for so long, I have supported many firewalls in my life and sold many firewalls in my life. And I actually am a big fan of Fortinet, and I'm very familiar with their carrier grade firewalls. They're great firewalls. And the key challenge is you need to have nice high throughput firewalls, but still they're perimeter based. So even if they're internal and doing internal segmentation, you really don't want to make them your major enforcement plane for workflows, because workflows are dynamic, they're automated. And the challenge of using them is there's still kind of a bottleneck, because you can only enforce where they can be at the perimeter, even if they're internally segmenting. So the concept is being on the workload, having a host-based firewall really relieves you from the stress of having to do it at perimeter points, right? So the idea is you're able to enforce in a more granular fashion, in a seamless fashion across the entire spectrum than by having at a perimeter. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have internally segmenting firewalls. Go ahead and use Fortinet for that. But this really is apples to oranges. And then when people finally roll out and provision software-defined segmentation, they kind of really get it. It makes it much easier to enforce and that kind of thing. But that's a great question. And that's often the question we get from our customers when they're looking at this.
Great. Thank you so much for that. We do have another question. Can you explain how you handle DDoS situations, considering the potential cost of computing resources when the app server is having to respond to or block all of the requests?
So where we come into play with DDoS situations is because we're able to set up segmentation based on process and identity and fully qualified domain name, it's a lot easier to allow the appropriate communications and disallow the DDoS situations. So the idea is, if it's a situation where someone is DDoSing a proxy, for example, the idea is we can make sure that it's the right points of origin going to the proxy server, or from a proxy server to backend web database, and making sure that it's the right two services talking to each other. And that's how we can help reduce the attack surface of a DDoS situation. We're not like Arbor Networks, right? Arbor Networks is wonderful for DDoS in a very different way, and that kind of thing. But we're more on the lines of we can help reduce the attack surface by only allowing what is meant to happen. Great question. Like that question.
Yes. So that's all the Q&A questions that are teed up so far. If anyone does have any further questions or follow-up, feel free to put it here in the Q&A. I'm definitely interested in hearing a little bit more about Infection Monkey. That seemed like a very interesting tool. Did you want to offer us a little more color around that?
So the Infection Monkey was originally set up to show how lateral movement works inside data centers and clouds and in the hybrid cloud environments. But what it really has become is its own solution as far as vulnerability assessment in the new world of cross-platform attacks. And it is so much fun to work with because it really helps you visualize all the problems you have in your environment. It has the ability to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to look for secure shell issues. I'm going to look for weak passwords. I'm going to look for all sorts of different things. And you deploy these monkeys across the environment in a safe fashion and show compromise. And you have this big map that shows you it. And then most importantly is the reporting that comes out of it. There's several reports. There's a security report that says, hey, listen, you had an identity issue here. We were able to add a user. Here's all the information about it. So for an executive, you get the red, yellow, green kind of map. But for the person who wants to go after the problems, you're given a real prescriptive way of going after them. On top of that, because everyone is looking at zero trust, and there were a lot of vendors who came up, hey, we're zero trust compatible, or we decided to come up. Well, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about let's operationalize zero trust. And so being able to look at your results as based on zero trust is really handy. And on top of that, the newest release that's coming out will have MITRE, the MITRE attack grid. So you'll be able to see it on the MITRE attack grid. So the beauty here is you're getting the information in the way that you want to digest it and handle it. And because it's an open source project on GitHub, anyone can contribute to it and the like. And so it's become kind of a really fun way to educate people on how these things work, as well as showing them in their environment a very powerful way of understanding what's going on and what needs to be fixed. So it's a lot of fun, and people really love it. When I go to trade shows, people ask me as much about Infection Monkey as they ask about our Guardicore Center, which is software-defined segmentation.
Yeah, definitely. It did seem like an interesting tool.
Yeah.
All right, great. I don't see any other Q&A, and I believe we're waiting for our next presenter. So this concludes the first part of the webinar, unless anyone has any other questions that they would like to ask Dave. Nope.
Great.
All right, great. We'll just give Robert a few more minutes to join, and then we will be talking about Android application security. Thanks, Dave, for your time.
Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. As a reminder, we're just waiting for our second panelist. In the meantime, if you have any Q&A, feel free to drop them here in Zoom, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. All right, great. Looks like Robert is here. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on as a panelist.
I got promoted.
Hey, Robert. We are excited to have you here. Robert McCurdy is, he works at cybersecurity. He's a specialist for network and ETD at Newell Brands. And he will be talking to us today about Android security. Robert, are you ready to present?
Yep, sure.
Fantastic.
So, you know, a little bit of this stems from just understanding application security and realizing that, you know, your back then, probably 10 years ago when I was playing with this stuff, your bank applications were less secure than your paid freemium games, things like that. Can you guys hear me okay, actually? I just popped in, so.
Yes, we can hear you great.
Cool. Okay. So the idea behind that was that, you know, if I can understand how these freemium games work and how these freemium games work and how to potentially cheat or work the system, whatever, understand how they work, then I can probably pretty much pen test any application, right? So this pretty much presentation is going to be pretty much 100% demo. So there may be some technical difficulties, but it hasn't changed that much for me, at least in the past, 10 years or so. I've been playing around with Android stuff. There's a lot more tools out there, and I can give some links when we're all done here to some frameworks and stuff like that for testing. But let me go ahead and start to share. A second. So what I'm going to be showing you guys today is just some classic examples for kind of testing mobile app testing, more specifically like Android mobile app testing. So it's a bit of a convoluted process to set up, but essentially there's two main components. One is an emulator of any kind. I use the Nox app player. This is an Android emulator that's basically designed to play games on a Windows desktop. It's kind of shady, and I wouldn't use it on like any commercial application. I would want actual hardware that, we vetted and stuff. But for my own personal stuff, I play around with this Nox player. So that gives you your Android emulation with all your bells and whistles and stuff. And the other main component is any kind of interceptor. A big popular one, if you guys have heard of, is called Burp Suite. So essentially what you do is there's a few video tutorials out there, but they're not really all super inclusive. But you can start out with the free version of Burp Suite. You can add things like Logger, JSON Beautifier. There's a couple other ones. Even crawljacks could be somewhat useful. But in general, Logger++ is pretty important because you can replay some of these attacks and get a feel for what's going on and have a little bit more power than the free proxy that you get within Burp Suite free. So what we set up here is we've installed Burp Suite. We've configured the proxy to be to listen on all interfaces, because if by default it only listens to the local interface, that 127. That interface is only reachable by the computer that you're coming from. So generally speaking, I just leave it on all interfaces. If you're doing an assessment or something, you want to make sure that you're protecting that interface from people just arbitrarily proxying through your server. So this allows you to view the traffic between an application, right, and the internet. So it's kind of a middleman that sits in the middle. And proxies those connections. The other kind of moving parts are what I'll do is usually install a different launcher, which the launcher that comes with Nox is like gross. it's a bunch of adware and stuff like that, ads. So you get you a decent launcher, and you can kind of at least temporarily replace the launcher that's annoying and got pop-ups and stuff. So the first component is trying to get the connectivity set up properly. So what you'll do is generally you'll go in here, you'll go under the wireless, which it's not really wireless, obviously. It's a like emulated wireless on the Android device. And you can go in here and set up the network, and you'll put your IP of the Burp Suite IP and the Burp Suite port, which is the same that's in here. Let me go ahead and start record this. Forget. All right, so we have our listening on all interfaces. We've established what our IP is. We know what it is. It's this 187 IP, which I use internally at the house here. And we save that out. And the other part is configuring certificates. So when you break encryption, that's when things start to get upset. So if you man in the middle your traffic, that's all well and good, but everything nowadays is encrypted, right? So you want to get in the middle of that encrypted traffic. And to do that, you need to install certificates on the device. Now there's other ways of doing this, but the great way to do it through this is the Foundstone Cert Installer. And I can provide links to that too. But it's essentially a really easy way to install a certificate on your device. Once you've installed Knox, you can go in here and check the box that says root and reboot. It'll give you root access, which a lot of these other ones like Jelly Beans and all these other Android emulators are pretty awful. This one, you install it, it's gross, but it gives you root, and a lot of the games work because they have, special drivers built into them somehow to make the games work a little bit better. So I'll just do an example here of anything. So we can say like yahoo.com. We'll put in our proxy IP. Was it 187? I said. Yeah, 187. And then the proxy port's 8080. And you can install the CH certificate. And that's really what you generally want to do. That will install a root certificate to the system. And you can name it whatever you want to name it, Burp2. And every time you kind of reinstall Burp or use a different version of Burp or change computers, those certificates are randomly generated. So you have to kind of reinstall the certificates a fair amount of times if you're working from system to system. So we've installed the certificate. We can install a specific site certificate. And then once we're all done, we can click this test certificate chain. And once everything says yes here, this means that our encrypted traffic, in theory, is going to be going through Burp Suite. So now we have Yahoo HTTPS coming in. So what you want to see at the end of the day is Burp Suite eating HTTP and HTTPS traffic. There's also WebSockets stuff in here, which custom protocols. You got some weird binary protocols going back and forth here. That's an entirely different messiness. But generally speaking, you want to set up like a Google account that gives you just an anonymous Google account to set some of the stuff up. So we have our connectivity. We've got our basic stuff. We can test our browser functionality. So like at yahoo.com, wait for the site to come up, and you can kind of click here and it'll say view certificate. And if it says Portswigger, that's the company that Burp Suite comes from. So we validated that the certificate is valid. We got Yahoo injected certificate in here, and we're kind of in a better spot. Now, the fun stuff is I essentially we'll kind of start with this application, this Coin Master thing. And originally, I think I actually removed the software. I'll show some screenshots of it. Yeah, the 3D wallpapers here. This is the first one. This is one I was just playing with here relatively recently. And basically, see these followers? None of these people actually followed me. They were in a list of users from out of Burp Suite. So essentially the way their following works is the request comes in through a unique ID for each person. So what we can do here is we'll turn on Interceptor. See if we can show you. Once I follow somebody, that's Google Ads. And you'll notice there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Obviously, Facebook's, you got Google again, Google again. That's not it. More ads, more Facebook, more ads, more ads, more garbage, more ads, more ads, more garbage. Actually, I'm just gonna turn the Interceptor off, follow this guy, and see where I end up again. I'm trying to find a specific request that talks about adding. Nope, nope, nope. And this is just one simple thing that I'm doing in the application. I'm actually intercepting responses, which might slow things down a little bit. Ad test, nope, nope, ads. Some more interesting other things you can do with this is you can say, don't intercept requests to this host. So now we're not going to get stuff from Google. Don't intercept to this host. That's a different app. Crash analytics, more Google garbage. I honestly can't find it. I'll look through here. I know what the request looks like. A lot of your actions are posts within on any of these apps. And yeah, unfortunately, you can't with the free version. You can't do searching very easily in the proxy list. It's like $200 a year for Burp Suite. It's definitely worth it if you're into this type of stuff. Let's see another way I can clear this out. Let's see if I can't turn down some of the noise of this. Nope, not gonna install. We're just gonna force stop it. A lot of times, you run an app, it's gonna be doing stuff in the background literally forever until you kill it. And even then, especially with Android, apps can kind of restart themselves. User follow. Okay, here's our example here. The user ID is my user ID. Let me check chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. Am I good? Can you guys hear me? And feel free to...
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, feel free to ask me any questions in chat or whatever. I'm moving pretty quickly.
Yes, anyone who has a Q&A while this live hacking is going on, feel free to click the Q&A button at the bottom and type in your question, and we'll have Robert answer it for you.
Yeah. Towards the end, I'm going to try to go through as quickly as I can, and then we'll have you guys kind of pick an app that you want me to kind of take a quick look at. This one's funny because all of the stuff you do within the app, more or less, is held within user IDs. So what you'll commonly see, first thing you'll commonly see is the least common you'll see and easiest to kind of take a look at is no SSL. So in this example, we have a post to somewhere with no encryption. So we're not encrypting this traffic that we're sending out, which is an easy giveaway. The second thing you'll see is HTTPS, which is encrypted traffic, but you will end up with some gobbledygook. So for example, you'll get not, this is like an image or something, but in some of the examples of games that are more protected, you'll get a hash, and that hash is generated based on a encryption key that's built in within the application. So it'll say something like, coins gained, and like the coin value will be like coin value equals, and you can try to change that number, right? But it's not going to do any good because it's a hash that has to be checked on the other end. So oftentimes, if it's a popular game, done by the right kind of people, they will kind of do this technique to where they won't use SSL pinning, which SSL pinning allows you to take that encrypted certificate, put it inside of the application, and basically drop everything else on the floor that has to do with decrypting the traffic. So that way they've pinned the certificate of the encryption inside of the application itself. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to see that traffic in some cases. If you're lucky, there's other ways to try to inject into those functions. There's Frida, which I tried to get to work. There's objection in Frida, and that will help you facilitate this SSL depinning, where it injects itself into the process and will, when it goes to call that function to encrypt, it just kind of like overrides it and lets you see the traffic before it goes to the endpoint. But half the time, I feel like I'm starting to see more often these either over SSL, but you'll see encrypted values for the parameters. So you'll see like something like this as a parameter, and it'll be like coins equal and then like gobbledygook, which you won't be able to interpolate, or you won't be able to change or modify without that encryption key. But what you can do is you can try basic things like replay attacks, meaning that if I got a coin or if I picked up an item or whatever on the server side using that unique ID, I can potentially replay that item, or maybe I can change it in a way to where it registers on the back end that I've picked up that item twice. So with some of those ones that are encrypted, you can still do replay attacks. And for example, I've seen games where you have 5 characters, and you have your strongest character is you've spent all your money on your strongest character and it's the best. And there's a hash value assigned to that character. Well, I was able to take that character hash and assign it to everybody in my party. So when I was attacking someone or attacking NPCs, non-playable characters in the game, whatever, that same character, although the visual representation of the character was different, it was actually performing like the actions of the character that I had kind of cloned 5 times. So that's kind of like an example of like a replay attack that can work for you. The weird thing about this guy is that this is a 3D wallpaper thing. If you've ever heard of like a parallax wallpapers, it's actually kind of interesting. So it's like a live wallpaper design type of app. But the way they do searches or even likes, I was able to mess around with the likes because I've got 4,200 likes, which that's not really something that can happen. So what happens, the way they're doing it is they're saying my user, when I go to follow someone, see, we got this /follow. It's not encrypted. Excuse me, it's not encrypted, which is not super good. It's not encrypted, and it has this user ID, and this is my user ID. So I have this information, so I know who I am, and this says action true, user ID, blah, blah, blah. So we're following this user ID, and we're saying action true. If we change it to false, of course, we can unfollow that person, right? And it comes back and says, great. You can do silly stuff, right? I can take this person's ID and put this where they are. And you wouldn't think this could work, right? Like, you're not authenticated as this user ID. You can't just follow someone arbitrarily. Like, you would think that you can't just pass this user ID out to an unencrypted web server and follow somebody. But apparently it doesn't matter. So when I realized, you could basically change your user ID without any consequence and put your user ID in the follow field, you can take something like Intruder, and Intruder allows you to create custom attacks or custom testing based on a number of different methods. So there's a little auto thing here. So if you leave it, it will select the parameters for you, at least try to, and encapsulate the parameters in these weird looking funky things. So this is the traffic that's going in between, the phone application and the internet. So you can clear it out and do something. So this is myself. So I'm saying follow myself, and then replace this, say add, and then we can basically load up a payload of, and just by browsing the application and looking at, for example, if you want to get a bunch of users, you can go to the application itself and scroll through and look through, okay, who's following this person, or maybe there's like, you're basically looking for a bunch of user IDs to harvest to generate other stuff. So essentially what I did was, I think I did like basic search. Yeah, I did like a user search, and I just typed the word like Bob, and you get, however many users come up with Bob, which my search button is kind of broken because the way sometimes you have to switch to a soft keyboard, a software-based keyboard to get some of the stuff to go through. But the idea here is you'd search for Bob, you get a bunch of user IDs, and you harvest them into a text file, and then say you got a bunch of these user IDs you want to fuzz or test with, and yeah, that's basically telling you that it's really slow. So the intruder is basically throttled to like 1 request per second or something like that. The response here is, we got a success true, which there's no user ID of this. We should get like, failure, bad ID or something. So there's like there's no attempt at all to like validate any of this stuff from that standpoint. Maybe this end is validated. I don't know. I haven't tested it. But you're getting back a 200 OK, which is a status message of everything is great. Yeah, we followed random IDs, followed this person. So, and it's kind of more of the same. When web applications first popped up, we had these types of issues within web applications, and people started realizing that you can't just put an application on the internet and have it allow silly things like this. What ended up happening is now that mobile application stuff is still in its infancy, even after 15, 20 years, we're still seeing basic, like really bad practices within mobile applications. So we basically reset the clock on a lot of these applications because we're doing it for mobile. And since people don't understand, the traffic, they don't look it, they don't see it, they don't care, right? It's not cost effective then to wrap everything in like, crazy encryption because it's just followers, right? That's not super valuable. So that's one example of a pretty common theme you'll see. There's not a whole lot more to this guy. I had a post up here, and I had it set up to where I had a bunch of likes, and then their bot automatically, this probably popped up to the front of their page, and then they probably removed it because it's like they knew it was fake because I have like 2 posts. And then the followers kind of dropped off because I think people probably unfollowed me when they realized they hadn't actually voluntarily followed me. So that's pretty much this 3D wallpaper thing. I'll force stop it. The other piece that goes with the FS cert installer is Proxy Droid. So Proxy Droid essentially, where you have your proxy settings for the interface, for the wireless, quote unquote, that's pointing to your Burp Suite server. Where Proxy Droid comes in is it tries to hijack all the traffic and send it to Burp Suite. So it's pretty straightforward. You install it. It's actually still on the App Store. You put your Burp Suite host in here. You put the port, leave everything else the same. And then once you switch this on, all of the traffic for anything in theory, anything that's running in theory that doesn't have like SSL pinning or some kind of custom protocol, like some kind of weird protocol, is going to go through Burp Suite. So you can have visibility into all that traffic. This is another one, kind of another example of playing around with Burp Suite. I don't know if I saved any of this. I didn't save any of the sessions or anything. It's pretty straightforward. This is one of those type of play once a day or play whenever games. Time-based lottery gambling game thing. And some of these games have real money payouts, and that's like something you don't want to go messing around with. It's one thing to play around with like a game that's mostly local and whatever, but when you start getting into these companies that are, actually giving you, money or gift cards or, some kind of monetary value, then you're getting to the point where you're not just doing research, you're potentially doing something completely illegal. This is probably against terms of service and stuff like that, but I wouldn't necessarily consider this like something that would be malicious, right? You're understanding the applications, you're kind of just doing research. And so, there's not a whole lot going on here. So this is one of these little spin things, and you spin the wheel and you get constant pop-ups to buy stuff. All right, so we got a reward of 5,000. So we can kind of scroll down here to these posts. Yeah, noon active spins. Where was it? There's a sequence 77, which is kind of weird. Auto spin is off, but what the key is this part. This is where all the sauce is, kind of. In some instances, so there's two scenarios. One is you send the request is what I'm sending, what my app is sending to the server. So this is going to the server. So you can modify the request and say, for example, oh, well, maybe the sequence 77, maybe that's like how many spins you have or something. So maybe we can change this to like 1 million, right? Or like a negative number or something like that. And maybe that gives you unlimited spins. The other way to do it is to modify the response. So when you send a request out, the response goes out to the server responds back saying, you got $1 or whatever. When that goes out to the server, it comes back and you can intercept it and say, okay, I have, instead of 3 shipyards or whatever, level 3 shipyard, and now I have a level 4 shipyard, right? And then once that gets sent back to the app, it may or may not show up within the application and actually save it on the app and the server side. So it's hard to tell what is stored on the server and what is stored on the app. So I can tell myself, or I can tell the app that I have 9999 gold, and it will show that I have tons and tons of gold. But it actually, on the server side, if you close the app and open it back up without any Burp Suite shenanigans, it won't. It's actually server based. So when you claim a reward, that reward is logged on the server side and says, oh, well, he spun, he spun whatever 5,000, and that value is going to be stored on the server side. I did find, at least with this app, I did find that it was sort of half server side. So there's, of course, my name, and then you kind of get a random player assigned to you to kind of attack if you end up having to attack somebody. And in here, a payout. Pay. Yeah, here we go. So there's this pay, and then there's also a sequence. Okay, that's the sequence number that aligns to when I sent the request out. So the sequence number has to match should in theory match the pin. So this R1 value is our first hammer deal thing. And then this, let's see, sequence 7, R1 is 3. So this is 3. This has a value of 3. The R2 has a value of 3, right? And that's the hammer again. And then the last one is a R3, which is a value of 2, and which is the gold, pot of gold, or whatever, right? Now, and it'll tell you the payout is 5,000, okay? And we got 5,000 here. So we can try to do something silly, which is sometimes works, is within Burp Suite, you can do like a find and replace. So we can say within the, we're talking about the response here that comes back from the server. We're going to change the response body. If we see the word pay 5,000, we're going to replace it with pay, I don't know, I think it's 80 is one of the bigger payouts. And then we add that in and try to kind of whatever. We can even go a step further and add regex. So we can say replace a, ooh, I don't remember my regex. It's a digit plus digit backslash with 8,000, something like that. Regex your online cheat sheet here. Yep, digit plus. So backslash D plus, so the plus goes on the end. Yeah. So now we're saying replace basically any number that's not separated by a comma or anything weird like that with 80,000. The weird thing about all of this is that when you spin the wheel, see our payouts 80,000, but if you notice, our number didn't go up 80,000. I'm not a math whiz, but let's see, 825. And this is also another thing that happens. Dirt, we broke it. So the reason this broke is, I'll show you, we basically have to kill the app now. Now that it's kind of frozen. And the reason I'm thinking it froze is because, we'll show the response request shenanigans. Okay. So here's our original response, is what they call it within Burp Suite. Our pay, where's the pay? Pay 0. So we have a pay 0, which I guess that might be the problem. If you get a pay 0, then that means there shouldn't be a payout for whatever this spin was. And since I replaced it with pay 80,000 and whatever this sequence is, maybe it's something completely different. It like threw up. Now it says like device client error, and we get this like weird like debugging information with like some weird like Java, looks like some Java garbage in it. What I'm thinking is either a result of modifying a event that's not an actual, not a paid event that doesn't, it's a pay of 0, and putting a value in there might have broken it. Or if you notice, there is an auto-modified response, or this is the original response. So this is what comes back from the server. This is broken, and this happens like a lot. Like 1 out of 5 apps I look at has some like broken, like completely broken something in it. This response from the server is broken. It has a 100 continue message, and then this might actually not be, this might be actually legit HTTP code, but I've never seen 2 like codes in a thing. So what happened at least probably in this instance, is either the pay being 80,000 that's 0, or this is the original response and we modified it. And if you notice, there's a content link shoved in. Burp Suite automatically shoved in a content link under the end of the header. So what it thought is that when it saw this 100 continue, it said, oh, that's the end of my header, which is all the junk that you don't see in the background. So everything after the first blob of data is the body. So this is the body of the request or the response. And here's like the header information. The problem with this response is that content length got shoved in under whatever this is, and the phone probably picked up nothing. So it got back from the phone. It probably got this back from the phone, and maybe all of this missing, and it dropped everything else on the floor. So it basically said, instead of pulling all this information from the header, it probably just took this content length, and that's like, oh, that's the header. That's all I've got. I don't know any of this other stuff. I'm dropping all this on the floor, and it just craps out. I'm thinking that's probably what was happening with the spin being broken. But what I was able to do was come in here, PID 8000. I think, see if I can find usually I'll clear all this out every once in a while. And in just the amount of, what, 1, 2 websites, 3 websites, 4 websites, 5 websites, 6. I mean, you got at least 6 or 10, 15 different domains just launching the application. You haven't done anything yet. You just launched the application and logged in. So we'll go back to here. I'll actually try this again. What I wanted to show was an example of it actually working. So what, we're at 825, and looks like we broke it again. Yep. We replied back, auto form. The original response was it 8.1? Yeah, pay 5,000. It's definitely I think it's the injection. Does that replace 5,000 with 80,000? And it's throwing up because of this content length. So what you actually have to end up having to do is, instead of using the functionality that Burp Suite has, I've actually submitted a bug for this. You have to kind of manually intercept these requests. Force stop. And the weird thing is, sometimes it works for a few spins and then it stops working. And I don't understand why that is. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It also might be the sequence. So if the sequence doesn't, that the reward doesn't match the sequence, and maybe the pay doesn't even have anything to do with how much money you get. Maybe it's based on the sequence, right? So you can pay a million, and it's never going to give you a million. It's just going to give you whatever the sequence is. So if we can figure out what the proper sequence is for the biggest payout, which that big bag of money looks like that's the best payout. I don't know, but it might be just a matter of replacing this with a valid payout, instead of trying to modify the pay value. There's other stuff in here like spins. Here's Easter too. I don't know what that is. Other interesting stuff is like shields. You have a certain number of shields you can have that kind of protect you from being attacked or whatever. You can replace that value with something. Another interesting thing you can do is kind of a battering ram approach. We could say response body match. What was that? /digit plus. So we're saying here, basically replace anything that has a number value assigned to it with, I don't know, with a bunch of 9s. This is probably going to throw up or be hilarious. So we're basically saying with this, we're saying every single thing that has like a number, like pay, will be replaced, sequence will be replaced, R1 will be replaced with a bunch of 9s, Farm will be replaced with a bunch of 9s. Ships will be replaced with a bunch of 9s. That didn't work, but it was supposed to. Let's see. Oh, I didn't put the regex match. Burp. Okay, let's see that. Let's now. Did I break it? Yep. I broke it. But it's really more of the same, right? Let's see if it actually worked. Did it work? I don't see a bunch of 9s. And again, it's that content length breaking the phone. It feels like. Here's like the coin value. So this is how many coins I have, I think. Coins. Like several coin values. Here's my coins right here. And obviously, if you try to modify this, it doesn't actually work. So I could say something like, check Q chat or anything. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions or want to see anything, have any ideas they want to pass by me or comments?
So if anyone has any questions, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A section on the bottom of Zoom. We'll be happy to answer anything that you may have.
Cool. I'm gonna force stop this again because I broke it. So it's probably the find and replace or the injection of the header. And you can even tell, I even found a setting in here that says automatically update content length. I've unchecked both of these and it still shoves content link in there because I'm thinking match and replace is different than interceptor. So the match and replace functionality needs to be fixed to say like, don't update the header information. So what we have to do is we turn off requests, turn on response. So now we're intercepting the responses from the server only. We're going to close this out. And you have to be really quick with this application. Understand why, but you got to be like really fast. Oops, I didn't turn on the interceptor. So like there's 1,000. And what I was able to do, I wasn't able to change my value, my money value, I don't think. But I was able to give myself always the same spin. So I had 50 spins, whatever. I can always get 80,000 for each spin because I changed that value to always give me the same. So instead of getting a random thing, I always got the R1 or 2222 or 1111, whatever the best result is. Let's see. Okay, so here's a shield, right? We had 19 shields or an extra shield, so if somebody attacks us, here's a, oh, nope. Nope. Oh, I think that was it. I missed it. It's hard when there's all these other intercepts going on. Usually with mobile apps, I'll turn interceptor off. I will update the, I'll figure out the domain that I want to test, which is this post to, where are we at? Yeah, so here's our server, our URL, or our website we're posting to. So you say copy URL. So instead of intercepting everything, we're going to say if URL matches this match condition matches URL matches. I don't know if I need to put a wildcard here or what. See if that works. So now the theory is we're only intercepting this to the moon active domain instead of Facebook, for Christ's sake. All right, so here's our response back. We want to highlight coins. No, it's gonna error. It's probably already aired out. 1, 2, 3. Usually I start with like 9 million and go from there. And if it doesn't crap out, then you can kind of get an idea. And this is like some kind of roll. I was also able to make the payout be like 80,000 every time I did one of these. So instead of getting, you know, well, that's a lot of money, a lot of whatever coins or whatever. It was always 80. So every single reward that I got was always 80. That was outside of the spinning thing. So we'll see if we can't grab, change this, turn interceptor off. Yeah, I didn't like that. It like drops me when I try to intercept. So make our coins, make this 999 forward, and it drops us. So if we try to modify our count, our coin count directly, it's like, no, you can't do that. But here's like a bag of coins. I guess a bag of coins better than one coin. So we got 2, 2. So the last two values from our last post are, what was that? 10,000 payout. So this is the right request or response. What we want to do is, where is the little, where's the R2 thing? Yeah, here we go. Sequence R1 plus R2 for 3. So we're not going to replace the sequence, but we're going to replace this. Let's see if this will work. Response body. Just take this guy. This is a little bit more difficult because you have to capture plus. So replace digit, any digit, any digit, any digit. So each one of these values that comes back from the, what do you call it, the slice, we're going to replace it with 2, 2, the last two. So it's 2, 2, 4. So we'll do 2, 2, 2. So the theory is now we should always spin the backs, which is an 80,000 reward. So although we're not able to like modify anything directly, we can at least say, oh, we get 10,000 every whatever, every spin. Or maybe not. Maybe it didn't work. Oh, I didn't turn it on. Weird. Is that 1,000? 20,000. So that's not as good as the whatever the other one was. It's like 111. Let's see. But you can really do this with anything. So let's see, where are we at? We got like 30 minutes. I've been rambling long enough. Let me try to think of anything else interesting.
We have one question. We have a general, how does this work?
What work in specifically? I mean, this is pretty highly technical stuff. So by how does this work? What are we asking, right?
Yeah, I think some new folks have joined the webinar. If you wanted to give just a couple of quick takeaways to kind of orient them.
Yeah, so for those of you that showed up late, I actually started fairly early. The framework here is testing mobile applications using Nox App Player and Burp Suite, intercepting the traffic between the mobile application and the internet to just play around with freemium games or single player games. There's actually some other things called, they're pretty sketchy. Was it Game Guardian? super sketchy. So Game Guardian is a local. I don't know if anybody's ever played with Cheat Engine. It's basically a cheat engine for Android that will allow you to do memory, look at the memory of the application and modify stuff in memory. Let's see if I can't. Ooh, do I feel frozen? What are we doing? Let's try to load the website. It's taking forever. Trying to find the download. I do not want to install that. Oh, here we go. This is also super sketch. You know, as far as like using this to do work, that's not something you want to do. There's plenty of videos probably on this stuff too. See, Knox BlueStacks. They actually have one specific for Knox. So the way we're doing, that's something to point out. The way we're doing our emulation is we're using Intel's Haxium emulation to speed up the Android emulation. And from what I understand, it's x86 somehow emulating Android. So for example, if you were to get a binary or a executable on your Android phone that's not x86 and run it to do, for example, memory injection or things like that, it's not going to work because it's expecting ARM architecture to do its thing. Whereas this is x86 based. So you have to install like an x86 based application for whatever you're going to do. That's what I can kind of conclude, but I don't really understand because we are running ARM in theory. But the idea is that I think it gets weird when you're trying to like do stuff with binaries in Knox, and the architecture doesn't match all the time, so it won't let you do stuff sometimes. So I don't know what this is. Something else. So we end up with this little draggy droppy thing. And this can sometimes be effective too. We come in here and say, that's a really big number. We pick the application we want to kind of scan. And this is a memory tool. Among other things, it does other stuff. But we can come in here and search for, I can't read that value. Let's go back. Oops.
And we do have one question.
Sure.
When you say modify memory, is it a specific assembly language or is there a language being used?
It used to be something, the bytecode or assembly code for Android used to be something, and now it's what, Dvorak? Android bytes. Dalvik. And it used the Dalvik. It used to be something else, and they changed it. So there were all these tools to help you do all kinds of cool stuff with Android, and then they switched to this Dalvik architecture, or I don't know, bytecode, whatever. I'm not a bytecode guy. I'm not a memory guy either. But yeah, it's Dalvik is like the machine language for Android. Anything over Oreo, I think. It doesn't tell you, but that's anything KitKat. Yeah, it's now unsupported version KitKat, blah, blah, blah. No longer Dalvik is now unsupported Android version. So it looks like it started at KitKat, and then after that, or before that, they went all Dalvik for everything. So all these like hacking tools and cool plugins and stuff that did all kinds of crazy stuff with binaries, they quit working because they were aimed at the older architecture or bytecode for Android. Let's see. Let's go back to our game here. How do I close this guy? I'll take a screenshot. So the idea is to play around with apps like this to understand how things work or don't work within an application. And then when you need to test a real application for work or an engagement, you can use that knowledge that you acquired playing around with free games to do testing. So we're going to look for our, I have to use a soft keyboard. We're going to look for our money value here, 23189. These don't work anymore. A lot of them don't, at least the idiot-proof way. We don't know. So we're basically searching the memory for this value, which, did I completely type that wrong? So if we don't get any hits, we'll know. There we go. That's not even close. 2, 3, I missed a digit there. Let me try again. Derp. Yeah, see, the keyboard doesn't work, which is actually, I'd rather soft keys because the keyboard doesn't necessarily work all the time for all apps. 189 0 0 0. So this might seem stupid and dumb and stunt hacky and whatever, but at the end of the day, sadly, this is how a lot of applications work. So we search the memory. Here's the memory addresses that have to do with this value. Okay, that's like a lot. It looks like, I don't know, probably 20 or 30. So what we'll do is we'll close this out. We'll get some more money. See if our find and replace is still working. Nope. Now it's the same value as 199. So we're gonna go back to our search and look for 199. See, here's a 199. So we can search again. I think this one? Yeah. And it's kind of hard to see with like 15 different transparencies going on in the background. We'll go back here. We'll search for. This is not a new search. This is hopefully an existing search. 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 9. And usually this doesn't work. And even if it does, half the time it doesn't work server side. So now we can take kind of all these values. I don't know how to select. Can you select multiple? Yeah, they're all selected. I don't know. We can actually just go in here and change this to a bunch of 9s. 4, 5, 6, 7. Copy. Yes. Oh, that's value. Looks like the value's already changed. Oh, wait. Is it keeping it for us? No. That's right. So what we're doing here is we're taking all these addresses and shoving 9 million in front of them. And we're going to hope that the app doesn't crash. Oop. Yeah, like I said, this usually doesn't work. Because a lot of these memory scanners are, I don't know, they obfuscated, or I don't really know. But now the theory is that this should be a 9999, and it's not gonna work. Nope. So that's the classic example of like it not really working. See, now it's 27, 279, 279, 279, 279. I mean, these are it. This is it. There's another thing you can do. Let's search. That's copy. I need like a bulk modify. Select, play, fast forward. You can do kind of speed hacks too. That looks like some way to save. More addresses. Copy as group search. Yeah, I'm not sure how to modify these all at once. That's what you really kind of want to do. You can freeze values with memory editors too. Here we go. This might be it. Keyword, I don't know what that means. I've had less success with these, this method as time goes by, because I don't know if they obfuscate it or do whatever on purpose. But we can go back to Burp Suite and do it at the network layer. In theory.
Okay, we have one question.
Sure.
What and I'll maybe add a little bit to this question as well.
Sure.
What's your go-to for learning Dalvik? And what I would add is, how did you learn how to do what you're doing with Burp Suite and all of this as well?
Sure. So like for the bytecode stuff, you know, you can start with standard. I would start with your standard x86, like Windows 32-bit binaries. There's lots of websites out there. Crack Me challenges. There's bunches of websites for that. I would start with. I'm not any good to it. I can't talk to any of that stuff. But I would start with just x86 assembly, understanding how that works. Especially like on a Windows XP box with like no advanced memory stuff. Start figuring out how that works, and then understand how, you know, x86 architecture works, and then you can start diving into ARM-based stuff. Because there's just so much more content out there for standard, you know, standard Windows binary or bytecode analysis or assembly analysis, whatever you want to call it. Then I would start with Dalvik. There's a tool out there called like Home. This is what I was trying to get to work before we got here. I don't see it. Mobile. And it really just started with web application security, and then we got smartphones, right? So after we got smartphones, I had my first Android. And I rooted it, and after I rooted it, I started realizing that you could do things with it that you weren't necessarily, you know, you can strip out ads from games, you can, you know, modify stuff in games, modify memory, and then realizing very quickly that these mobile apps are just awful, and they don't a lot of them don't bother doing anything correctly or validating anything because they figure you're not going to look at the traffic, or you can't look at the traffic, or it's kind of WYSIWYG. So we're still kind of in our infancy. This is a framework that I was trying to get to work before we started, and make it portable. But this allows you to like do Java stuff. You can, and you know, hook functions dynamically. It like automates a lot of this stuff. It automates objection. So it's not in the screenshots, I don't think, but it automates objection, which helps you with SSL pinning. But I'm not a Java person, so I struggled a lot to get this framework set up. But this is basically what you would want if you were going to start going down like intercepting Java functions, which I'm thinking this is the way people are kind of doing things now. I don't think people are doing a whole lot of like bytecode analysis unless they're looking at like Dalvik bytecode stuff, unless they're trying to like find certificates or find something sensitive information inside of the application itself. So what you'll see sometimes is, I haven't seen it, but you'll see clowns putting the root certificate for the SSL pinning inside of the app so you can decrypt the traffic on there, the private certificate, because they don't know what they're doing. So they're like, oh, we'll put all the certificates in there so we don't have to worry about it. So when somebody's doing coding, they just have to go to the folder that has the root certificate in there, and they can, you know, troubleshoot and troubleshoot the app. Because if they don't have that root certificate for the app, then they can't look at the traffic and troubleshoot. So sometimes they will include, intentionally, they will include the SSL certificate to decrypt the traffic inside of the application itself, which defeats the whole purpose of encrypting traffic. But this is a UI-based, web-based UI for, modifying functions. He has this fake app here that he's injecting functions into and doing all kinds of crazy Java stuff, which I don't understand, but I would like to, but I don't have enough time, as it were. But that's kind of how it went, how it all started. Just, for work, I did vulnerability assessments, penetration testing, and started to realize, the gap of knowledge with testing mobile applications. And you'll see a lot that, these apps will do things like, you'll be somewhere, it'll be an app for a park, a theme park, and you'll launch the app and it will give you your geolocation. It's like, why? I'm not in the theme park. Why would you send my location, right, for a theme park when I'm not in that area? What you should do is instead of pulling people's GPS coordinates, you should say, if they're not within this range of GPS coordinates, then don't send, the company my exact coordinates. But you'll see that a lot is just constant, badgering, and, every second, every 10 seconds, every 5 seconds, something gets sent, an ad gets sent, something happens. And, we talk about this digital age of like monitoring and whatever, and it's I can't even fathom the amount of data that's being collected on us by mobile devices and all that. And this gives you an idea, it gives you an insight into all that. Like here's my email for Gmail, here's the API, here's like some session information, all kinds of crazy stuff. I'll pop back over here. 1, 2, 3, the third value on this post. R2. The 3 is 1. All right, so we change this to get a better payout if we change this to 1. I don't even know what the best payout for the role is. I actually think it's the attack role, because when you attack, you can get 80,000 each individual thing. But I basically mess around with it long enough to where I can make it cheat with it, and then I move on. That says 5,000. It's supposed to be more. Anyways, yeah. See, 5,000 is a payout 2,000. So it's interesting. Maybe I can change this now. This is when it starts getting weird. Yep. It's very odd. But usually I'll play with the app long enough to figure out if it has new vulnerabilities I haven't discovered before. And then I'll kind of move on to something different.
Sounds good. So as we're wrapping up here, we have a couple minutes left. Just a reminder to everyone, if you have any Q&As, last minute Q&As, let us know in Zoom. We'll be happy to take those and answer those. I guess if you could just give us a quick overview, some key takeaways that would be very useful to anyone who is either new to this or just cybersecurity professionals in general.
Yeah, I mean, try it out. Get a box, old box. Get Nox Player, get Burp Suite, and try to set up Burp Suite first. There's a few videos I can point you guys out to help you set up the infrastructure first and get the listening or the man in the middle part of it first. And it's kind of, there's a million things you can do just with random applications. You can reward yourself things, you can modify pretty much anything, or potentially modify anything within these apps. So I would say, just let me know, reach out if you're interested in setting up, a little test lab to do this type of stuff. Let me know, and I can put some links in the meetup for tools and suites of tools you can do. But really, all you need is Windows, Nox Player, Burp Suite, and to get the infrastructure set up, the connectivity set up between the app and Burp Suite, and then you're off to the races. You can just start looking at stuff, and you start seeing patterns. Every time I see a post, that's probably something I want to look at. I want to modify the data. Oh, I can change this to something else and replay this and get a feel for how everything works, and then kind of go from there.
Yes, definitely. Looks like a lot of pattern matching today as you intercept traffic and give new payloads and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Great. All right, good. I guess would now be a good time to go ahead and wrap it up. And
Sure.
Great. Well, if anyone has we got one Q&A question.
Sure.
Any great books or tutorials to recommend on Burp Suite?
There's tons of stuff on Burp Suite. They actually spun up a free like training thing. Let me make some notes here. URL for Burp classes. You also want the Git. Some links. But yeah, I would say I'll put some links up for the Burp Suite class stuff. I'll put video links to get Prox and Burp. And then also objection. Deepening. So you can, if you can kind of do these kind of 4 things, you can get going. But yeah, I'll put some links to kind of put this together.
Yeah, that would be great.
Go from there.
Yeah, and another question is, you're using Burp Suite, so it's like Wireshark essentially for Android.
Yeah, Burp Suite is. I mean, you could do this in something like Wireshark. I think they do have like a find and replace in Wireshark, or ways to modify traffic in Wireshark. This is more specific to mainly web traffic or protocol, HTTP protocol. Right? This is the HTTP protocol. It does have support for WebSockets, and there's also something called nom or nope. There's one for NOPE proxy is for analyzing. I don't really understand it. It's like a protocol analyzer. It's sort of like a cross between I'll put the link to that in the notes. It's a cross between Wireshark and Burp Suite, where it tries to like do DNS shenanigans to try to like get traffic for protocols that aren't HTTP, basically. So you can intercept protocols inside of Burp Suite, kind of like you would with C and Wireshark, but I never could get it set up right.
Great. And then the last question we have, is there any sample websites we can use to intercept for lab?
I would say simple. Just start simple. A regular HTTP site, which there's not a whole lot of those, thankfully, laying around. There's a list of, I'll do hacking sites. There's like a bunch of ones for like Hackney Bank and stuff like that. But there's tons of free resources out there for sites. Anyways, I have a list of like free websites that you can pen test with Burp Suite.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, no problem. Well, thank you very much for the live demo today. I found it very educational. I think we had a lot of good questions as well. That was definitely really good. Great. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up our webinar today.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to the next webinar every Wednesday. Again, we'll be doing them at 7 p.m. Central moving forward. So hope to see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take it easy.
All right, goodbye.